everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar. I'm Julie Petty, and I work with Meat and Livestock Australia, specifically with the goat meat industry. Joining us for tonight, we're really excited to have you all here, and we're super glad that you're interested in this project, and hopefully we'll be able to answer some of your questions tonight about the goat levy industry performance indicators project. So I introduce tonight's guest speaker. We will do a little bit of housekeeping first. So if that details there on joining online, if you have, hang on one tick, I'll just get to the right thing. If you're having any issues hearing us at all, there are a couple of ways to join the webinar tonight and connect your audio. The first and the one that's up on the screen now is probably the most simple, and that's just that's following the instructions there to dial in. So you can also join and connect your audio via the speakers and whatnot on your computer if you'd prefer to do that as well. I should say too that tonight's webinar is being recorded. So what we're going to do, because there's always a few people who miss the live streaming, we'll record the webinar and get that uploaded to the MLA website in the next couple of days so people can come and listen to it at their leisure. If throughout tonight's session you've got any questions for myself or our presenter, you're welcome to pop those into the chat function, which you should see on the right-hand side of your screen there. You can pop that into, so it's visible to everyone, or just send it directly through to myself as the host. What we'll do is go through and get those questions addressed throughout the webinar with our presenter, and that way hopefully we'll be able to answer any of the queries or concerns that you have about the program. So the project that we're talking about tonight has been funded through Goat Producer Levy. In part, there's a couple of reasons why the project is going ahead and is being funded, and it's all about essentially getting, I suppose, a thermometer check on how the industry is going tracking. So what we're looking for is both some information that we can collate and go out to the industry as a whole and say, look, this is how the industry is going over time. If you're a sheep or cattle producer and you're looking to get into the sheep or cattle industry, this kind of information does exist to some extent already. So if you're someone looking to get into the industry, one of your first questions is, well, what's the cost of production? What can I expect from this kind of enterprise? How does it compare with another type of enterprise like Dorpers or cattle or something like that? And presently, we're not really able to answer that question particularly accurately. So that's partly what this project is about. And it's all about us, I suppose, the service provider back to the industry, getting a better handle on the industry-wide status and how things are tracking over time, because this will give us, I suppose, a line in the sand and a benchmark that we then continue to go back to over time. You know, is the goat industry growing? What's happening? Is it contracting? All this type of thing. So our presenter tonight is John Francis from Home Sackett. So John has a wealth of experience in financial analysis and looking at different businesses and benchmarking across agriculture. John's going to be running through the project tonight just to give you a bit of an overview of the kinds of things that if you wanted to sign up and be part of this, because we're chasing 60 commercial producers across the country to sign up and get involved in this, preferably with a meat production focus, but in all different sectors and regions of the industry as well. So John's going to give us an overview of what might be required, the sort of information that we're looking at, and they're going to go and look at some examples of how that kind of information might be used. So you can see at the end of this project what kind of information is going to be shared both privately with yourself and then what might be aggregated and shared with the industry and how that might be used. So I might kick off in a second, John, with yourself, and I'll just, one thing for the participants, just so I know that I'm not sitting here talking to myself, if you could just pop into your chat function there just some commentary around your postcode or whether you've had any rain recently, anything like that, because that'll just tell me, I suppose, feel like I'm here by myself, and also know that you've found that chat box and you found that okay. Oh, thanks very much, Henry. So we've got a couple of coming through already. Sadly, no rain for some people. That's normal. John, if you're ready, I hope you don't mind. I sort of stole a bit of your thunder there, but if you wanted to start off with the presentation, I can start flicking through for you.
Thank you very much, Julie. So thanks for the introduction and thanks for the opportunity tonight. As part of this project, I'm actually currently collecting data, so I'm coming to you from Perth, New South Wales, with the wonders of modern technology, and so if there's any issues as we go along, it'll probably be a function of my end or the technology at my end. So thanks for your attendance tonight. I think Julie's given a good segue into or introduction for the project, and I'll run through a little about what we're looking to achieve tonight. Julie, I assume that's progressed. I'm looking at slide 2, is that right?
Yep, we've got a photo of your lovely self there.
Fantastic, all right. So what we'll do in this webinar is really just talk about the project. I want to talk about what a performance indicator is. I'm going to talk about what benchmarking is, to give you a bit of background on why I think producers should be involved in this project, what the process for involvement is, what we're likely to be reporting, and I'm going to talk a little about how to get involved in the project as well. What are we looking to achieve? Well, I think Julie's probably covered pretty well. We're really looking to generate goat production and financial performance. The reason is we don't have a lot of baseline performance measures for the goat industry. The last time I was involved in a similar project, it was to collect some cost of production data, and that was in about 2013, and I know some of the people in this webinar at the moment actually were part of that project. But this goes one step further, really to talk about and profitability, as well as collecting a few more performance indicators about the goat enterprises. So there's a little more involvement in this project, which will require a little more input for individual participants in terms of time, but hopefully there'll be a lot more value back to you, both in terms of how you can improve your business, but also more broadly for the industry in understanding what parts of that industry are doing well, what parts are doing not so well, and why are the parts doing not so well. So really what we're looking to do is generate some baseline information so that future investments delivered by MLA on your behalf as levy contributors or levy payers are made in the best way possible. So we all want to understand a little about goat enterprises and how those goat enterprises perform against other enterprises. So in order to do that, we need to capture some of this information, collect benchmarking information from across a range of sectors, and that will allow us to compare just how well goat producers are doing relative to wool producers or sheep producers or beef producers. And that's important because everyone's competing for the same resource base. We need to understand whether those resources could be better allocated to a different enterprise, not only based on the physical attributes of the land, but also the financial performance of those enterprises. So we assess those features of profitability, and typically the way we do that is to collect the information, to look at what parts of information or which producers are doing well. So we actually segregate that information, and then we look about what are the attributes of the business that really lead to greater levels of profitability. And I'll talk that more this evening. And finally, I think I've already talked to this, and where to future levy dollars to generate the best return on what is effectively your investment. So, Home Sacker, and what are our qualifications to deliver? I'm a consultant and I'm based in Wagga. We have a team of others within business, some involved in marketing and communications, but the majority of us are as consultants and some support staff. And our business is largely all about improving profitability in agriculture. So we've got a strong focus on farm business performance. We like to take an evidence-based approach to recommendations for improving performance. In order to do that, we need the evidence, and that evidence is generally generated by collecting information from producers and then looking at that information in a comparative means. But I'll talk about that shortly. At the moment, we benchmark around 175 farm businesses annually. That represents about $1.5 to $2 billion worth of assets under management. We report the results of that information back to those farm producers. Now, that's a commercial prize for us as a consultancy. People pay us to benchmark their business, and they pay us to report back to them. So what this project is effectively doing is offering you that paid service for free as a result of MLA investing in that. Our qualifications, we have an excellent track record for confidentiality and privacy. We understand the importance of that to you, and we understand how important that is to the industry. So any data that is collected, retained by us, the data will be only reported back to you as aggregated, or back to the industry rather, as aggregated information, and everything will be identified. So no way of actually comparing or understanding who's who in that data set, because we need to do that. We really just need to know what the cohort are the most profitable do. In terms of reporting back to you, we will report back to you as an individual, and your data will be compared with group data. So we have collected and collated goat cost of production data Australia-wide in the past, so we think we understand what we're doing. We have experience in communicating business information. So that's our background and qualifications to deliver on this project. So I just want to now go into what is the performance indicator, and what is it that we're looking to measure. So by way of, I guess, analogy, I felt that the best way to think of a performance indicator or a series of performance indicators for your goat enterprises or farm businesses is to think of the report that's generated in this goat enterprise performance indicator or benchmarking process is really just it's like a dashboard. And think about the dashboard or the trip computer in your car. What it does is actually measures the performance of the car, or more importantly, it measures the performance of the car and the driver with regards to a whole range of aspects. So if you think about a dial, it's actually an indicator of a different aspect of your car performance. Some of the indicators are linked to each other, and some of them are standalone. So, for example, you think about your speedometer. That not only tells you about your speed at one point in time, but it also links to the trip computer to tell you your average speed. So there's a number of gauges that are telling you any number of things within your car at any point in time. Really, that's what this reporting mechanism that we are providing back to industry is actually doing. We will report, but it's not about the performance of your vehicle, it's about the performance of your farm, and more particularly it's the performance of your goat enterprise, because we're actually not going to measure anything other than your goat enterprises. So the dashboard gauges are basically used to monitor your car and driver performance and efficiency. That's exactly what some of these gauges are indicators, and they're called key performance indicators because they're actually a measure of your efficiency, your performance in terms of goat management. Those gauges are designed to sort of provide a warning so that you can change something before you do some damage. But when you're looking at those gauges, the gauges don't actually change your car performance. All they do is indicate how you're travelling. And that's exactly what this benchmarking process is. It's indicating how you're travelling. So if car performance, for example, improve, the driver actually has to interpret the information on each one of those dials or gauges or instruments, and they've got to make a decision about what to change and actually implement the change. So I'm just going to go back one. So that's no different to this project. We will provide you with a whole range of performance measures, but the actual changes, those performance measures are just that. They're like the outputs of the dashboard indicator. For you to actually extract value, you actually have to make some decisions to interpret the information, and then you have to implement some changes. I guess this was all about trying to indicate that doing this. If you think about you trying to drive your car efficiently, or me driving from Watt to Burke yesterday, I wanted to get here as efficiently as possible. And what that meant was I couldn't go too fast because it would have been inefficient, because I would have been breaking the law and more than likely got caught by the police, which would have actually slowed my efficiency. But I didn't want to go too slow because that's inefficient, and I would have got here at all to the night, and then I'd have to deal with the kangaroos and all the rest of it. So someone asked me yesterday if I had a choice between driving without the gauges and driving with the gauges when I'm looking to get here as efficiently as possible. I'm always going to take driving with the gauges, because the gauges actually inform me. If I'm told to drive here without the gauges, I feel a bit like this guy in this slide. I feel as though that I can't really get here efficiently because I'm missing the best way to assess my driving efficiency. And that's exactly the same in your business. Really, to drive your business as efficiently as possible, you really need a dashboard. And that dashboard is all about those performance indicators that we're proposing to provide you in this project. The slide is just one I sort of like. It's all about making sure, a little about interpretation, I guess. So my background's in agronomy, and this really appeals to my agronomy sort of expertise, I guess, because you've got two rabbits in this slide. You've got the one on the right who looks extremely smug, and he's extremely smug because he's got lots of carrot top there. And the bloke on the left, a little rabbit who looks a bit stunned in the headlights, he's got, not much by way of carrot top. But if about it rationally, the reason the rabbit on the right has lots of carrot top is because all reserves from the top haven't been sunk into the carrot below, which is the part that actually matters. So he's got something that looks great, but doesn't actually deliver on what he's looking to achieve, and that is maybe to feed all his little bunny family over winter, and he's hardly going to do that with that tiny-looking carrot on the right. But on the left, looks across the fence and thinks, well, that looks far more impressive than what I've got, because he's only measuring measuring what's above ground. But have a look what's going on below, and he's going to feed his little bunny family for winter quite easily. The point of this slide is partly is to indicate that you actually, there'll be lots of things on the dashboard. Not all of them are measures of that directly relate to you. So you've got to do a bit of sifting. If all you measured in this case was carrot top, but there's no relation between carrot top and what's below the ground, then you're not measuring the right thing. And really, you've got to be careful of that in your own business to measure the things that matter. So we'll give you a whole lot of indicators. It's to you to think about whether they all matter to you. And there is a bit of interpretation that's required, so you just don't get lost in the numbers and say, well, I've come up with a really good number, but it's a number that doesn't really matter. So a really important part of this journey on where delivering is to teach you also, or to deliver something that you need to actually scratch the surface of and learn more about. And so a bit about this project is actually for you in terms of delivering or learning more about business skills and understanding some of the business skills as well as the operational skills and operational things that matter. Okay, that's what a performance measure is, but it's not a benchmark. It can be a benchmark. Benchmarking is something very different, and I just thought I'd use this sort of analogy, and I know everyone's into footy, but it was probably the best way I could think of what is benchmarking. Benchmarking is simply a comparison to identify the difference in your performance against something else. And so in this case, on the top left there, I've just gone on to the AFL website, and they've got a stats part of their website, and you can drag out just about anything you like because they measure just about everything in the AFL. And they've got tools there that allow you to get one player against another, which is what's happening in that top left, which is Justin Martin versus Harry Cunningham, two midfielders, and I'm no expert in AFL or anything else, but what I can do is on the top left there, which you can't read that well, but there's just a little blurb about each player, and one's been playing for longer and all that sort of stuff, so you've got to interpret some of these with caution. But the next slide down on the left is basically a benchmarking process where the performance of each of these players is gauged, is ranked as elite, average, below average, or above average. And so each of those colours is representing whether these guys are established as elite players, which is the blue colour. Above average, I think it is the green, and so on. So, and each of those things in the middle there is simply an indicator, just a performance indicator. So what this data is doing, effectively look at performance indicators, and it's actually looking at the performance indicator of one player against another, and that's a benchmark. So the first is rating points, and then they've got things like freeze for, free against, and then it's bounces and 1%ers and time on ground and matches played. All of those things are actually performance indicators. The benchmark is how they compare against each other or against everyone else in the league. So that's basically what a benchmark is. And when we're benchmarking, all we're doing is grouping the information we're ranking it based on the 20% based on profitability, and we're going to aggregate that as one data set, and then we're going to average all the information, and then I give you your information so that you can compare against the average of the industry, the average of all the data we collect, as well as the top 20%. So really, what that does is then allows you to go through those performance indicators, actually assess, well, what is it about my business that's different to some of these most profitable? Sorry, I've gone too far. How does benchmarking improve my performance? So that's a brilliant question. How does benchmarking improve your performance? And the short answer for that is it doesn't. It is just reporting the outcomes of what you have done to date. For you to extract value and to change something and improve your farm performance, you actually have to interpret the information. You have to identify the opportunities for change, and you actually have to implement something for change. The starting point for identifying what those things are that you may need to do to actually change and improve your farm business performance or your goat enterprise performance. Should you get involved? Look, really a great opportunity to learn how your goat business is performing. It's a great opportunity to identify opportunities for improvement. It's also a great opportunity to start pulling yourself out of some of that operational stuff, which I'm not saying is not important, but I think to mixing that operational stuff with some really good business skills. So it's a sort of stepping stone into understanding some of those business skills. It's not all about, it's not just going to become an instant expert on business performance, but at least you will have a report where you can actually start learning about the way this report's laid out. You can start learning about what the production is of your business, and then you can utilise that to make some changes within your business. Okay, so why should you get involved? So the short thing that we've actually tried to make this process as easy as possible. So in order to make the process as convenient as possible, we're going to minimise the time that you need to spend with us without compromising on quality. So we're going to visit you on farm to collect the data, or we're going to help you online to collect the data. And some have requested that we just meet online, and others want us to go on farm. There are some constraints as to where we can travel and how efficient that is and so on. So it may be that we need to collect it remotely, but the point I'm making is we will spend time with you to assist you to make the process easy. We know that some of you won't have had exposure to some of this information and the way we collect information, so we're aiming to make it as easy as possible. Next reason you should get involved is just to improve your knowledge. We're going to help you identify those parts of the business that can be improved. And aren't things that are going to be picked up in your compliance accounts or your tax reports or that your accountant can put his finger on, because compliance accounts report the things very differently to the way we will report them. So we're actually going to put a value on your labour, and that value is going to be $70,000 a year. So if you're full-time in your goats and you don't generate $70,000 worth of income, you're going to make a loss in our system, because we feel that you're running a business, and if you've got a full-time labour unit, the opportunity cost of you being in that business and running a full-time labour unit is $70,000. So that's the price that's the value of your labour we're going to allocate to you. So these are some concepts that will come up through the process, and they are consistent methodologies that we use with all our benchmarking. So put a real value on your time. So it doesn't cost you nothing to be in your business. It costs you the opportunity cost of you being there. So we provide you with a report that actually allocates the value of labour to your business. looking at this over the long term. So we're going to do 5 years. We're going to collect data over 5 years. I'm out on farm at the moment collecting the first 3 years. I'm then going to go back and collect the next 2 years in about a year and a half's time, and they're typically financial years. And what does that do? Well, it really provides proof of performance and gives confidence when you're budgeting. It may even be a really good point of leverage for finance negotiations with your financier. If you've had business performance as owned by this GOAT enterprise data, then you'd actually be a low-cost lender, and you should have some leverage with your bank manager for actually lowering your cost of funds. That's exactly what we do with our clients who benchmark with us commercially. If they've got 10 years worth of data, we go to the bank and we leverage that information in the marketplace to ensure that they've got a low cost of funds. So we're going to provide you with an external opinion to bounce ideas off. So during that consultation, either on farm or online, I will be there to discuss other issues and so on. The primary issue is collecting this information, but we are reporting back to you as well. Opportunity, this is really about identifying those things that you change to be more profitable. And you can't really do that if you don't measure them at the moment. So we're going to make an anonymous comparison with the best, so you compare how we're going. There is no cost to you. This gives an opportunity to recoup some of your investment levies. Commercial value of this exceeds $6,000 because we're collecting 5 years worth of data. And typically for people who haven't gone through this process before, to collect this information will typically take nothing less than 2 to 3 days in the office of your time. Given we're charging you out at $70,000, a significant time investment that we can actually shortcut for you. And confidentiality, identifying you'll remain anonymous in that data set. Okay. So involved, look, goat producers with a focus on meat production, there's a limitation. We can't take everyone on. So people with 10 or 12 goats probably aren't going to get first go at this because it's just about value back to the industry. And it's probably not, you're a little bit away from being a commercial enterprise. So there is a bit of scale required. I've only got the eastern states here. It's not confined to the eastern states. We'll take Western Australia data as well. There's sort of some constraints in terms of legislation with South Australia, but they're the data sets we've got at the moment. So we're taking medium to high rainfall managed systems, we've got rangelands fenced systems, rangelands unfenced systems, and trading systems, and then seed stock as well. So some of it we may need to collect remotely just due to some practicalities on the resources that we've got to call on. So the process, well, the first thing is you can contact myself or Drew at Home Sacket, and we'll give you some details at the end of this. We're going to ring you to arrange a time to meet with you on farm or online, whichever sort of works. We'll spend a few hours with you, talk you through what sort of data you will need. We'll collect 3 years worth of data now. Then we'll come back to do our second data collection. We'll report on the first 3 years, so we'll give you some ideas of our interpretation of the information, and we'll collect the other 2 years. And after that, we'll follow up to collect any missing information. So it's if we just spend 3 hours with you and we've got every bit of information. Today I've spent 4 or 5 hours with someone, and still there's a lot more information to collect, partly due to the complexity of the business that we're talking about. So we want to put some rigour around that, and sometimes that does take a bit more time than in some businesses than others. In order to do that, you're actually going to need to provide us with some information. And so you're going to need all your sales data and expense data, and preferably if you've got that group up prior to getting there, that will be useful. For unfenced and wild harvested herds, in terms of managed herds, we need your opening numbers, your closing numbers, your sales, any purchases, deaths and natural increase, and they come out of your compliance accounts available. That's assuming that they are true, reflective of what's actually happened. We need the livestock numbers in your other enterprises. So if you run goats, and goats represents 20% of the gross value of what you do, and the remainder of what you do is run sheep and cattle, we need sheep and cattle numbers because we're actually going to pro rata some of the other information to so that we can allocate costs according to the goat enterprises and so on. We need your land values or your asset values. So think about what the value of assets is under management, and we need that by year. So you're going to have to think outside the square a little bit and think about comparable sales and what the capital growth is. The reason we need that is because we are assessing profitability, and profit is a measure of resource efficiency, and resource efficiency is about all capital that you've tied up. And for the majority of you who are landowners, 80% of the capital that you've got tied up will be in the land that you run, with the remaining 20% being in the livestock and the plant and equipment and that sort of thing. And labour is an important part, particularly for rangeland systems and even for medium to high rainfall systems, because labour is the biggest cost in the business. So we really want to explore labour, and so we're looking at labour efficiency. We'll be looking at anything you do in terms of capital works to improve labour efficiency and those sorts of things. So ask a range of questions to try and extract that information so that we can add value back to you when we're reporting labour. So one of the important benchmarks that we have, key performance indicators, is around labour, and I'll talk through that shortly. So what do you do with the information? Well, the first is check it for errors. You've got to be able to look at this information and say, well, hang on, that doesn't make any sense to me. We run more goats than what you said, or whatever. So you've got to do a logic check on it. Do the results make sense? If not, why not? So they not make sense because if the only reason they don't make sense is you don't charge yourself out as a labour unit, but we have, well, actually, whilst that may be a different way of reporting it, it's actually the correct way in terms of our methodology. We're interested in misquoting your numbers or that sort of thing. So the next step is learn about what it's actually telling you. What is this information telling me? So this is where it will take time for you to interpret the information. We send information about the methodology and how we've actually reported back to you. You need to read that information to assist with your understanding, because the profit that we report may be very different to the profit you have on your compliance accounts. There are very good reasons that they will differ. And none of that is about the valuation methodology that we use. We use market-based valuations, whereas your compliance accounts will use tax valuations for every bit of livestock. So we're doing this at market values. We really want this to be real and reflective of the true business performance. And that way you can compare your business nearly against any other industry as well as within the industry. So we offer positive or negative. If not positive, why isn't it? Is it that you've really high cost structure, or is it that you've got really low income? So then let's start looking at the production key performance indicators. Are there things you need to change there to produce more, or is it about your costs are just way too high relative to some of those more profitable people? So having your data with the top 20% is really useful, because start to look at your own cost structure of your business and your own income generation, and we compare this per DSE as well as gross or per hectare, so that you've actually got lots of different measures. So the per hectare measures may be useless, particularly if I'm in a 1,000 mil rainfall area and I'm trying to compare myself with someone out in rangelands. Those per hectare measures just aren't going to be comparable. Per DSE though, they will be. So when my goat for goat sort of number, that may well be a really good comparison to make. So some of these won't be comparable between rainfall zones and some of them will. But that's why we report that in a range of different ways. Identify one low-cost area for improvement and focus on that. So start with the lowest hanging fruit. What that I can improve that actually doesn't cost me much. If it's something that is a timing issue or a thing that you can change that doesn't cost you much, for that, and then start building your business from there. And the point is that there's things like the Business Edge course that'll help you with interpretation of this information. So once you get this, don't stop here. Think about what else you can do to educate yourself and improve based on the information you're getting back. So what report? We start with gross profit, which is basically, it's not sales. It's sales less your purchases plus inventory change. And we need your opening and closing numbers so that we value inventory change. If you're a managed herd, then we won't be able to capture that. That's fine. Next down is enterprise expenses. So they're things like animal health, selling costs, freight, contract costs, supplementary feed. They're directly attributable to that goat enterprise. So profit less enterprise expenses gives gross margin. The next is overhead expenses. They're costs of doing business. So they're things like your administration costs, your rates, insurance, pasture costs, vehicle costs, repairs and maintenance, wages. So it's going to include non-cash costs like depreciation, and we're going to use that at market values, and owner wages as well. And that gets you down to your net profit or EBIT, which just stands for earnings before interest and tax. So that's a management accounting system. That's part we're reporting. What we don't need to report is the bit below the line, which is how you finance your business, interest costs. We may know a little about leasing, but I can deal with that. Your tax we don't need to know about. We will need to know a little about your capital expenditure. So that's really what we're reporting on. We're really reporting down to that EBIT level, which really is valuable to you in terms of understanding your business. So this just, yes.
Sorry, because we've just got a couple of questions coming through. Sure. Is that all right, or do you have a break?
Happy
I thought
fire away with some questions.
No, I could also give you a bit of a break to have a drink of water or whatever as well. So I guess if you've got any questions of what's been presented so far, please pop those into the chat box. We can go through those with John. There's a question come through about, would love to participate. We've had such terrible seasons recently, it would point to a terrible picture. So I guess, John, there is a reason we would be interested in collecting information both for good and bad years. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yes, so thanks for that question. I think it's an insightful question, but don't despair. So you're right. There's a number of places that have had some really bad years. My response to that is we're collecting 5 years of data. So, and it is plausible that you won't have had any good years in that 5 years. However, they're in that data set that also haven't had any good years in their 5 years. And the important thing there would be to differentiate those between those businesses that also had poor years to establish there still may be differences in profitability between businesses. And what we find in droughts is that some people that weather the storm really well, and some people that don't do it very well at all. And that's valuable to know. So I'm going to argue that if you've had bad years, that's not a right to participate. I know you'll be disappointed in the outputs, but there's still something to learn, I guess, is the point I'm making. So even though droughts mean typically that you're not going to make profits, and they may mean that you make large losses, some lose a lot more than others in drought. Learning from the ones that lose less is still a valuable lesson in my view.
Yeah, with that, John, that's a good point. I think too, as well, if we're looking at collecting this kind of information to people who might be interested in getting into the industry in the future as well, it's totally unrealistic if we're only collecting data from people who've had good seasons, because we know there is a lot of volatility that that produces experience. So we'd be really quite leading to only collect that information on the good years.
I think exactly right. Yeah, and I think there is another point on that too. We have had people that opt in and out of our data set based on those seasons. My experience is that if you don't collect a whole series and you just what you're out on is when you're looking to use this information, say to expand or to buy your next place or whatever, and you take the bad year, you don't average, you just the average of the good years, and it really doesn't tell you what you should be knowing, which is what's the average of all years. And, you know, the fact that these 5 years have occurred means that, you know, it may not be that atypical. Now, some may be atypical, so you still put it in context. So, or next question, Julie, thank you for that.
Not at all. So we've got someone, someone said they've launched their goat business in 2016. Would they have enough information to be involved? Is that far enough back?
Yeah. So,
that might be something you can discuss with them offline, I guess, but it's probably a general question for the group. Yeah,
but look, I've had, I'm seeing someone tomorrow who has had unmanaged goats for quite a time. They're just launching their managed goat part of it now. We're doing both enterprises over the 5 years, so there'll be 5 years worth of data of unmanaged, 2 years worth of data of managed. So having 5 years isn't critical. If you've only just started in 2016, you'll have 16, 17, 17, 18. So 4 of the 5 years we're looking for. So yes, you can. I think that it's plausible to be a part of it.
And for someone who potentially is in their first year of their goat business, perhaps this is something to look in the future then, because there might not quite be data to participate in this round.
That's right. So look, I'm happy to talk to you. Probably best to talk offline, and
Let's do that.
we can establish if I pick it up in the next capture round or beyond that.
Well, Doug and Tracy will get in touch with you after the webinar just to set up a discussion with John's team so you can work out the nuts and bolts offline. Okay, so there's a few people in that boat. There's a few comments coming through. So if you'd like to set up a discussion with John, you can I'd probably just get in touch directly with John and his team, and we'll have their information available for you as well to be in touch. So if that's all right. So that is it for the questions at the moment. John, did you want to move on to, we'll go to the next slide. Conscious of sort of ticking my time. So
Yes, we're doing well. We're on time.
Okay. Oh, good.
So I just thought I'd report, just demonstrate some of the outputs of the report. First is this is these things are out of your control. So again, not everything we report is within your control. So this is graphically how we present some of the information. So the first is this is a data set for the 2017 year. And in 2017 year, the way to interpret this information is the black represents your result. And then I actually looked at the 20%, the average and the top 20%. And they should have come through. There's been a bit of this is lost in the colour of the graph. But basically what this says is in the year, rainfall as a percent of long-term average. So this is saying this person sat about 80%, whilst the rest of the data set, the top 20% received whatever that is, about 110%, 105%, and the average received 110%. So it's just that this is a benchmark. It's nothing you can change. It just allows you to compare how your rainfall. So this is saying your rainfall was a lot worse than the rest of the grouped average. Okay. The next one is land value per DSE. It's something we report, which I think is a useful measure. In this case, this person has a land value per DSE of about, what's that, $400 per DSE. In this case, I'm comparing it with the top 20% in 2017 year of the Home Sacket database. That's sat at about $250 per DSE, and that's partly driven by the fact that they run more livestock on every hectare of land. The average sat at about whatever that is, 380, and the bottom 20% sat at about 480 or 450 or thereabouts. So there's nothing you can do to control that necessarily, or some of you may be able to control it through stocking rate, but in the rangelands there's probably very little you can do, assuming you're at optimum stocking rate. Next is, this is just graphically how we present the information. Now there is a stack of information here. I don't want to cloud you tonight, but really I'll just interpret one of these, which is return on assets managed. So this is your most important, in my view, measure on farm of profitability. This in this case is a measure of goat enterprise profitability. And the graph just runs from 0 to 12%. Now, each of the colours on the graph just presents room for improvement. So what the red part means is, the black is your result again. If your result is between 0 and 4%, I go down here to this scale and it says, how much room for improvement do you have? You've got plenty. That's great. You know, you may think this is a terrible result. Really, that's a really good opportunity for you, because it means you've got stacks of room for improvement. We're out here in the yellow bit, how much room for improvement? Well, you've still got a bit to go. And if you're here in the green, well, you don't have much. You're really doing well. If you're 8 to 12% return on assets managed, you're getting a few things right, or a lot of things right. That's a really exceptional outcome. So that's the key performance indicator, is this one, return on assets managed. The benchmarks are here, which are the lines running vertically down through those colours. And what that says is the bottom 20% of the Home Sacket database sat at 1%, the average sat at about 4.5%, and the 20% achieved close to 10% return on assets managed. In the black line represents your result, which was 8%, which is far better than the average and just outside the top 20%. So really good performance in that particular year. Next point is then to go and look at what your 3 or 5 year average is. Just go back one there. So each one of these, I said I'd talk about labour. Labour efficiency does exactly the same thing. Net profit as a percent of gross profit is another KPI. That's just basically saying $1 that you produce in gross or sales income, how much do you keep in your pocket? And in this case, the black line says this producer gets about 70 cents. So for every dollar worth of income, they get 70 cents in their pocket. That's an exceptional outcome in a year. Gross profit per labour unit is another labour measure. So they're big ticket measures. Okay, so I don't want to go through and interpret every one because there's no point at this stage. So in example report, we also will compare your results against other data for other enterprises. And in this case, this producer, the 3-year average for this producer was $50 per DSE. That's better than the 3-year average of lamb for our data set. Not as good as wool, not as good as beef, but that's a pretty good performance. So how you compare against other enterprises is also delivered on that report. That's the same thing again and again. This is just how the report looks. In this case, there's a stack of information here, and again, I don't want to. The aim is not to convolute or confuse you or anything, but basically, one of those measures is the kilos of case weight produced over the whole farm here. And see, someone talked about the volatility before. Well, in this year, they've generated 23,000 kilos. In this year, it's basically tenfold. And so, there's a big difference. But have a look at the rainfall there. Rainfall as a percent of average in this year was 117%. Here it's 32%. Production or lack of production is driven by a really poor year. So this is where I'm talking about interpreting the information is really, really critical. Okay, next slide is just, yes.
Which are we on?
26. Is that what you're on?
Oh, no. Hang on. Sorry, everyone.
Oh, so I'm looking through here, but it's not showing up. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm controlling the slide.
Right. Are you on?
I am. Sorry, everyone.
So you see that data there in the example report, where I was talking to the total kilos produced. So the third line from the bottom, there's big variation between years, which is fine again, because some of that variation comes from the different, have a look at the variation in rainfall, which is 2 lines up. Rainfall as a percent average. In 2016-17 year, it was 20% higher than average. In the year, it was 32% of average, which is woeful. So it explains a tenfold difference. So you've actually got to read beyond just the numbers on the page. You've got to start thinking about the interpretation of those numbers as well. Now, Julie.
Yes. Thank
Right.
you.
So this is just your production key performance indicators. There's everything from, if you don't capture kitting percentage, that's no problems, but labour efficiency, production in kilos dress weight per DSE, kilos dollar kilo in terms of price received, cost of production. You see there, look at the range in cost of production, $1.76 in the good year, up to $20. So I've had a big loss on every kilo sold there in the bad years, and that's what happens. So bad numbers aren't, or they're a feature of volatile environments. Okay, next slide. So this is just big stuff at a gross level. So return on assets managed is across there. That's a measure of business performance, profitability, and there's a range of others. Some of those I've already presented graphically. And then here's the total value of assets allocated to goat enterprises. So in this case, this was a goat-only business. There's $10 million worth of assets. and in the last year it's worth 12.5 million, and that's just capital growth. That's what actually happens. So asset value is land, and the other part is goats. Even though goat numbers were down in that final year, the value of assets has increased. That's what happens in the market. When you land, you create wealth out of your land appreciating. Next slide. This is just presented on a per SE basis. So how we present all your income up the top, or purchases, inventory change, gives you profit. Then we've got your enterprise expenses here, all grouped up. Next slide, please, Julie. Your expenses are next, and that's gross. Next slide, please. And all inventory values and all sorts of things. Next slide. So that's basically, I presented everything. I didn't mean to confuse you. All I wanted to show is the depth of the information. Not all that information will be of value to you, and the further you are away from really understanding your business, the harder it will be to get your head around all those figures. But even if you're a long way from knowing your business stuff really well and having good business skills, having this information will be useful when you do acquire those business skills. So look, what I've put here is just our contact details. You can contact me on my mobile number there. I do have some appointments this week. Actually, if anyone's on the line, as in Burke or between Burke and Wagga, I've got availability on Wednesday and could meet, but I need to know pretty well tonight or tomorrow to arrange that. So that's an opportunity for someone if they're in that area and they're interested after this. You can say at info@homesacket.com.au. I do have it up there as well, but you could have john@homesacket.com.au. That's JOHN, or the other one is Prue, P-A-U-E. So each of those at homesacket.com.au. Write that down. If you respond to any of those, say I'm interested, please call me. We can get to the next step with you. Alternatively, go to webpage, which is www.homesacket.com.au, and there's a contact us sort of page there. Just doesn't say I'm interested in the GOAT project. Please leave a return either number or email address so we can contact you. No good if you just say contact us and I don't know who you are. So
I can.
Sorry, Julie.
Sorry, I was just going to say I can circulate contact information to everyone who's joined the webinar. So we can do that. And sorry, I interrupted you. So please.
I was just going to ask if there's any questions, or I'm happy to take them.
Because I mucked up the slides, so the current slide that's up there at the moment was you talking about the
return. Yep.
Yeah.
So sorry, I'll just quickly run through that again. I know people have got to go, but what this slide is showing, the black line represents your data, or the data that I'm in this data set. The red, yellow and green just represent, if you go to the bottom, it says room for improvement. So red means plenty of room for improvement. So really what I'm saying is if your result is between 0 and 4%, you've still got plenty of room for improvement. You can do better. If your result is between 4 and 8%, you've still got a fair bit of room for improvement. And if you're up in the green between 8 and 12% operating return, you don't have that much room for improvement. So really the point I was making there was you've got stacks of room, not much or a little bit. That green, yellow represent. The KPI is return assets managed. The benchmarks are home stack at bottom 20% sat at around 1%, be 20 years. Average home stack sat at around 5% or 4.5%. That's what that average line through the yellow is. And top 20% of our data set in 2017 achieved return on assets, excessive of capital gains, so just operating returns of around 10%. So is it achievable?
So the good news,
yes.
So the good news, John, is that no matter where you're sitting on that bar graph, it's actually good news. You've either got a heap of room for improvement and stacks of cool stuff you can do. You're still in the middle and you're doing some stuff and nailing it, and others there's still room. And then if you're at the top end, well, bloody news, and you're really doing a fantastic job. So
correct.
Good news.
I think that's exactly right. And that's, at the moment, we don't know. And so the reason we're doing this, you're so right, Julie, because this is all about where am I? Am I a yellow?
Yep.
Am I a green, or am I a red? And we're not judgments on you're red, bad. That's not right. Basically, if you're red, good, because it represents stacks of opportunity. It really means we, as an industry, you can invest in some of the low-cost gains still out there.
Yes, true. So the current slide is up there, just talking. This is your commentary around comparing your goat enterprise with some of the other different enterprises that might be
Correct.
in the region. Yep.
Yes, that's right. So what I'm comparing here, this is net profit, dollars per DSE on the left-hand axis, running from 0 to 30. In this case, all I'm going is this is how we'll report back to you. We will compare your goat performance against the average of the home stack at lamb, average home stack at wool, and average of beef. So yeah, we might also have, when we've got enough data, the average of all goats. Your data, then we'll have the average of all. And now it's just, basically I'm just showing you how some of the data, it's early days because we've got to get enough comparative data that we can actually present it back. Until that comparative data, you won't get a report with comparisons. You'll just get a report with your information. But more data that comes in, every data set that comes in then adds to the weight of data, which allows us for more comparative data, and then we can report back to you.
Yeah, obviously then once you've got enough, you can report back much more confidently rather than, much higher risk of it being misleading if there's not enough information in there.
That's exactly right, Julie. Yep. So the reason we want that depth of data and the range of enterprises and so on is so that we can have confidence in what we're delivering back to industry. That's exactly right.
Yeah. We've just got a question coming through whether people can have access to the slideshow, John. Would that be all right if I PDF that and send that around to people?
I can't see that will be a problem at all. Yes, more than happy
Cool.
for you to send that. Yep.
Awesome. All right, I will circulate that to everyone who's registered for the webinar. And what we might do, once the webinar recording uploaded, we'll include a PDF copy of the slides as well in case people want to flick through. So that'll come through to you tonight or tomorrow. Any questions from the audience? Because otherwise we might begin to wrap up. John, in the meantime, thank you so much for taking to come through and talk to us about the project in such detail and give us such good examples of what we can expect from it. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate everyone who's dialed in tonight to give us a chance to try and explain this. We're still chasing producers to sign up for the project. So if you're interested or know someone else who might be, we'd really appreciate at least just having the conversation, because obviously it's obligation free, and decide after the conversation with John and Prue whether or not it's for you. So, did you have any further comments or anything else you wanted to add as a final John?
No, I think I've said everything I need to, so thanks everyone for your contributions. I know it sounds a bit stark because it's talking at you, but certainly I'm happy. I've got hours in the car, so if you leave me a message, typically I'll ring you back and we can talk you through it and establish whether you're going to buy a candidate or not, or whether your data is suitable or not. Happy to talk to anyone about it. So thanks for listening in, and thanks for the opportunity, Julie.
John, thanks so much. So just one final question, John, before we wrap up. Is there any idea what the smallest operation is that you'd be looking at?
At this stage, but we are really getting to, in terms of those, in terms of the herds that are managed in the high rainfall area, we're getting numbers there. The smaller you are, the lower the probability. And that's not a discrimination issue. It's just a functionality issue of us pretty well getting close to where we need to be with our target numbers there. So call me. I'm happy to discuss it with you, and we can certainly talk about there's an opportunity outside of this, or I don't know. Just talk to me about it is really the best way to go about it.
As when we were looking at the project, we originally set up some targets in terms of number of producers, in a rangeland context or from a farm setting that we wanted to target, so we didn't end up with, all rangeland or all higher rainfall areas, and then it makes it super difficult to compare the other much smaller sort of data pool. So we've got sort of set targets for numbers of producers involved within the different, I suppose, enterprise types and that sort of thing, just to try and keep a bit of balance. So I might wrap it there. Henry, I can have a chat to you about your question if you'd like to drop me an email or give me a ring tomorrow. And my contact information will be on the email that I'll be sending out to you all shortly, with John's details along with the slides as well. So once again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. And thanks very much, John, for your time as well. I hope hopefully you'll be overrun in the next couple of days with phone calls, so you'll have plenty to do in the car.
Terrific. Thanks very much.
No, we might wrap it up there, and hope you have a fantastic night.
Bye-bye.